Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here and welcome back to the Mixing in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we are going to talk about analog emulation. So firstly, if you're new to my channel and new to my videos and you like what you see, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. So analog emulation. So this technically can be bundled up in the plugin discussion. It can be bundled up into the effects discussion. But I thought I'd create this short little separate section because it's a pretty popular topic these days, actually. A lot of people are always chasing these analog emulations. And, so what are they? So generally, they are plugins and they are emulating or pretending to be, trying to mimic vintage analog equipment that professional studios and recording and mixing engineers used in the days gone past or still using today. And this equipment is renowned for supposedly giving the sound of these famous artists and these famous recordings. You've got the equipment from Abbey Road that gave the Beatles their sound. You've got equipment for other artists from the 80s, the 90s, whatever it is, that used all this hardware and this analog hardware in the studios, the recording studios, and it supposedly gave them the sound that that you hear on records and CDs, whatever you listen to your music on these days, from then. And people are trying to chase those sounds. They want to try and emulate them. And a lot of plugin manufacturers and developers have started to analyze that equipment and create digital forms of them, so emulations of them. And a lot of us, including myself, go and buy these and use them on our mixers to create better sounding mixes, in quotes, because it's not always better, and get that style and effect onto our mixers. Now, some of them are very subtle, and some of them can be quite extreme depending on what you're actually looking for and getting. And there's tons of them out there. The one thing to keep in mind is that, they generally aren't going to make or break your mix, right? They're not going to change it that much. So it's more for, I would say it's more for people that are getting into the advanced area of mixing and they just want that little bit extra, right? They're pretty good at mixing, they've got great sounds coming out, and they just want that little bit extra professional sound. And look, it's a controversial thing, right? I'm not going to get into a debate over whether they're worth it. Do they actually fully emulate the hardware, or should you just buy the hardware, that sort of stuff, right? There's a whole discussion about that, lots of them, and I'm not going to get into that debate because I think they all have their place. If you can get analog hardware and you can afford it, great, go for it. You know how to use it, brilliant, do it. It probably is the best, right? How can you beat the original? Most people, like myself, can't afford it, so software is the next best alternative. You may not like it, you may like it. That's the thing. I'm not going to get into an argument about it because I think there's a place for all of it. And I think it just suits whatever you prefer, what you suit, what you can afford, what you want to get out of it. There's even an argument to even bother with these analog emulations, or is it just all snake oil? And it really is not worth the money they're paid for. And you could just do the same thing with a little bit of subtle distortion or something like that on your track, and bang, you're done. Again, another argument you could have. Anyway, let's get into Cubase and I'll show you a couple of examples just so you understand what I'm talking about and how they potentially might work in your mixes if you ever want to get down that, go down that road. Okay, so here we are in Cubase here, and I'm just going to give you a bit of an example or a couple of examples of what we talk about or what we're talking about when we mention analog emulation. Right, so obviously this is all done in a computer, right, in the digital space. Well, obviously the instruments can be real, they can be recorded, reel, that sort of stuff. So, you know, in theory, they're analog, they've been captured. But a lot of people like to get sort of analog emulation stuff going. So what we do is you just basically load it as normal plugins within our mix. So for instance here, I'm just going to have a look at this drum bus. Right. So some examples of what we might do here is say you might want to put on, for instance here, we've got this Britson thing, which is emulating like a console, British style console. So we're trying to simulate that we are mixing this in an English professional recording studio, right? So turn it on, and in theory, that should be adding some analog emulation. Now you may not even hear it because it can be very subtle. We can add the fat control on here, which will give us a little bit extra. Now, the trick is some of these can be very, very subtle, and you need to really be able to hear accurately on your studio monitors to pick them up. So, you know, emulating studio consoles is very common. The other option that a lot of people like to use is like tape emulators. So I think I store them under distortion, but I could be wrong. All right, we have one here. This is from Slate Digital. Right, so you can hear that's before, that's after, and you could change your tape type, right? 30 IPS to 15. Change the actual, so that's the tape speed. You can change the tape type. Each of these is supposed to give you a different, slightly different character, and as I said, they can be very subtle. You can change from 16 track, so 2-inch tape, to 1/2-inch 2-track. Change the bias of the tape. You can push it. Right, so if you want to, you can hear that's now squashing as a tape would do. Now that's with it 15 IPS. If we were to go to 30 IPS speed, we might find it doesn't squash as much. Well, we'll put that to normal first. See how that opened up a bit there? So more squashed on the 15 IPS. More open with the 30. So, you know, 30 on 16 track, 2-inch is going to be more for your mastering type. Might go FG9, which I think is a newer tape style. It's a lot cleaner. So that might be what you do for mastering. Yeah, you wouldn't push like this for mastering. You would maybe get it targeting around the 0 VU. But if you're mixing, you might want to go 15 IPS, 456, 2-track. You might want to push it a bit to give it that distorted tape squished sound. So that's before, that's after. And even though I'm showing this on the drum bus, right, if you add all of these subtle little analog emulations across all of your tracks, multiple levels, it can have a big impact to your song, and it can add that. I mean, I like to do it because I do hear the difference with mine, but you know, you need to sort of be at that level where your mixes are pretty good or very good. If you, you know, it depends how much you want to praise your mixes or not, and you're looking for that little bit extra to get them just even closer to the professionals, and that was where this could come in. It's not the sort of thing that's going to change your mix instantly. you need to be aware of that. So there's other manufacturers that do, other developers that do all of these tape ones. So you've got UAD. Okay, so they have different tapes. They have a couple of different ones. So, again, we could tweak the settings. All right, get it pushing into the tape a bit harder. And switch it to the output, drop it down, whatever. Right, again, but you've got all these different tape options. You can even go lower. You can change your calibration. You can change your head type. Change your speed. Many options with that stuff. Now, there's other types of emulations here where, you might be talking about compressors that emulate hardware. Right, this might be a hardware box that emulates. Again, some saturation, all different types of saturation. Now, I'm not actually trying to mix this. I'm just sort of showing you. Just giving you some examples of what some analog emulations are. Now, it could be simple things like EQs too, right? So a lot of people will buy plugins that emulate famous vintage emulation gear, EQ gear or compressors, right? So in this case here, we've got a Poltec EQ, very famous old. This is what it sort of looks like. It's a digital representation of the hardware. And, it's supposed to emulate as much as it can the functionality and the sound of the original hardware. And people buy these to get that classic vibe that it imparts. Now, the thing with this one here is that even if you turn all the settings off and you just put it back to default, it can sometimes impart a change to the sound just being on, because they like to emulate things like transformers and all these little hardware components that are not necessarily changed by the dials, but they're just part of the sound of the unit. Now, I'm not sure we're getting it on this one. Hang on. Let's see if we get it actually on the main mix. Because I have done it before and I have had some nice results where it does impart a sort of character to it. Again, it's subtle. So let's just turn it off. So let's... I thought that switch brought it in and out. It's this one. So let's do that again. All right, let's just with it off. So you can hear it adds a character without any of the settings on. I've got no EQ settings on. It's just adding something itself naturally. And it can be as simple as that. It's adding, let's just call it analog warmth for the sake of calling it that, because that's what everybody wants to say. And again, I'm not going to get into any arguments about whether it's valid or not, but it definitely changes the sound. Now, it may be just changing the sound in a digital form. Well, it's definitely doing it in a digital form, pretending to be analog. So it's not true analog, right? It's emulation, right? It's pretending to do what the analog gear does when you mix through it. And that's what this is. So hopefully that's given you some good examples and just a bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we reference analog emulation. So there you go, that is analog emulation. Let me know what you think of it in the comments. Do you use it? Do you not use it? All of that sort of stuff. As I said, I'm not going to get into any arguments about it. They all have their place, and I'm the sort of person that just says, you know, whatever makes you happy, go and do it. I don't personally care. As long as your song sounds good, then it's good. That's as basic as it gets. There's no right or wrong way to do things as far as I'm concerned. So, but you know, I still like to hear people's thoughts. Do you have your favorites? If you do use them and that sort of stuff. If you need to ask me questions about it or anything like that, do put them in the comments. I read all the comments and I'll answer as many of the comments as I possibly can, as quickly as I can, so that you can get the most out of this course. If you do like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my future videos. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.